The moment I opened my mouth, I knew there was no way to take the words back. The treaty room went silent, not the calm kind of silent. The kind where every guard near the wall shifts their weight at the same time, and every advisor stops breathing, and you can feel the air itself waiting to see if you just started a war. My name is Daniel Hale. I was the only human linguist assigned to the Keltari treaty talks, and for 8 months, I had studied their language the way a bomb technician studies a wire. One wrong cut, and everything ends badly. The Keltari speak in a grammar built like a fortress. Every sentence is layered with obligation, rank, and blood debt. Say the wrong ending on the wrong word, and you can insult a person's entire family without raising your voice. I had just said one wrong ending on purpose. Queen Veshlira sat at the head of the table, her spine straight, her eyes locked on me. Her stylus hovered above her tablet, frozen in the air. Nobody in that hall moved. I had spent 8 months watching her correct her own advisors mid-sentence, without even looking up. She noticed every mistake. She would notice this one. I had just called her throne a borrowed chair. It was not an accident. It was one tiny piece of grammar, a single suffix, hidden inside a joke I built from scratch, using their own rules against them. I had found it months earlier, buried in old dictionaries nobody had bothered to compare side by side. The word for throne and the word for borrowed chair were almost identical. Change one suffix, and a formal statement of respect turns into something else entirely, something dangerous, something that, if read wrong, sounded like an accusation that she had no right to rule at all. I only meant to study it, I never planned to say it out loud. But 8 months of stiff formality and careful words had worn me down, and in the final minute of the final session, with the treaty already signed and sealed, I stood up to give the closing statement. It was supposed to be 10 seconds of nothing. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your grace. The kind of sentence nobody remembers. Instead, I thanked the Queen for the honor of sitting, not at her throne, but at her borrowed chair. For 3 full seconds, nobody in that hall existed. Her advisors turned a shade of gray I had never seen on their skin before, the color they go when they are calculating how badly something is about to go wrong. One of the guards near the door put a hand near his belt. I remember thinking, very clearly, that this was how it ended. 8 months of careful work, gone, because I could not resist testing a theory about grammar and humor on the single most powerful person in the room. Then the Queen laughed. It was not a polite sound. It cracked out of her like something breaking loose, sudden and loud, and she slammed one hand flat on the table because she needed it to stay upright. Her advisors went from gray with alarm to pale with confusion, because in 400 years of court history, nobody had ever heard their queen laugh like that. I was not sure anyone in that room had ever heard her laugh at all. "Say it again," she said, switching to trade language, wiping one eye with her knuckle. "Say it again. I need to know I heard you right." I said it again. She laughed harder, and this time a few of her advisors laughed too, uncertain, testing whether it was safe. "Do you understand what you just did?" she said, once she caught her breath. "Our language does not bend that way. It has never bent that way. 400 years, and no one has ever found the seam in it. You did not just learn our tongue, Daniel Hale. You found the one joke hiding inside it. That is a different skill entirely. That is a rarer one." She stood, and the whole room stood half a second later, scrambling to catch up with her. "I am going to have that sentence carved into stone," she said. Badly translated. It is treason. Correctly heard. It is the funniest thing anyone has said to me since I took the throne. Or, she added, smiling now, since I took the borrowed chair. The room laughed again, hesitant at first, then for real, because she had just given every person in it permission to laugh with her. I did not feel relief until we were outside the hall. My station commander, a woman named Grace Whitfield, grabbed my arm hard enough to leave a mark. "Do you have any idea what you just risked?" she said. "One suffix wrong, and they could have called it an act of war. You gambled the entire treaty on a joke." I did know. I had run the numbers in my head 100 times before I ever said the words out loud. I knew the grammar. I knew the risk. What I did not know, not for certain, was whether a species built on precision and rank could still recognize a joke when they heard one. Every linguist before me had studied the Kelthari language for years and reached the same conclusion. Their grammar was too rigid, too exact. There was no room in it for humor, no space for absurdity, nothing but structure stacked on structure, forever. I had bet 8 months of work, and possibly the peace of 2 worlds, on the idea that they were wrong. That night, back in my quarters aboard the station, I could not sleep. I kept replaying the moment her stylus froze in the air, the 3 seconds where I thought I had ended everything with one careless suffix. I kept hearing the crack of her laughter after it, the sound of something ancient and rigid finally giving a little. The next morning, a message arrived at my door. It was written in perfect court script, sealed with the royal mark, requesting my presence in the Queen's private chamber. Not the formal hall, not the treaty room, her private chamber, where almost no outsider was ever allowed to go. Grace tried to talk me out of going alone. She said it could be a trap, that I had embarrassed the crown in front of witnesses, and this could be the moment they chose to answer for it quietly, away from cameras and advisors. I told her I did not think so. I told her the sound of that laugh was not something you could fake, not from a species that spent 4 centuries training themselves never to show weakness in front of outsiders. She let me go, but she stood outside the chamber door the entire time, arms crossed, ready to break it down if she had to. Inside, the Queen was alone, sitting by a wide window that looked out over the shipyards. She did not stand when I entered. She gestured for me to sit across from her, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "I have been Queen for 11 years, she said finally. In 11 years, no one has ever surprised me. Every word spoken to me is measured first, weighed for risk, polished until it says nothing at all. I have forgotten what it sounds like when someone speaks to me without fear." I told her I had been afraid, very afraid, that my hands had been shaking under the table the entire time I spoke those words. "Good," she said. "Fear made you careful. Care made the joke land exactly where it needed to land, and nowhere else. If you had been careless, it would have been an insult. Because you were careful, it became a gift." She asked me how I found the seam in the grammar, the tiny gap between throne and borrowed chair that 400 years of her own scholars had never noticed. I explained it the way I would explain it to any linguist, showing her the old texts, the dictionaries nobody thought to compare, the pattern hiding in plain sight because everyone assumed the language was too rigid to contain something as soft as a joke. She listened without interrupting, which I later learned she almost never did with anyone. "You did not just find a joke," she said finally. "You found proof that my people can laugh, even inside a language built to prevent it. That is worth more to me than the treaty itself. Treaties can be broken, this cannot." Before I left, she asked me to write down the joke exactly as I had spoken it, in her own script, so it could be added to the royal archive. I did, my hand unsteady, the ink smudging slightly at the edges because I still could not quite believe any of this had happened. Weeks later, when the final treaty documents were formally recorded, a strange addition appeared in the appendix, a single sentence, engraved rather than printed, sitting beneath the official terms of the agreement. Beside it, in her own handwriting, was a short note. It said that a human named Daniel Hale had found the only joke their language had ever contained, that no one before him had believed such a thing was possible, and that for the first time in their long history, the Kelthari scholars were now searching their own language for another one. I still think about that moment sometimes, the 3 frozen seconds before she laughed, when I believed I had ended everything with a single careless word. I think about how close a joke came to being read as an act of war, and how the same sentence, spoken with care instead of carelessness, became something closer to a gift. I never set out to make history. I only wanted to see if laughter could survive inside a language built entirely out of rules. It turns out it could. It had just been waiting, quietly, for someone patient enough to find it.